They called me a gold digger with glassy smiles and veiled voices. At family dinners, I was the lucky one, but no one ever asked what I gave up to wear their last name. They posted me like a trophy, polished for Instagram, edited for shareholders. What they didn't know was that while they smiled for cameras, I was smiling at contracts. The day I wired $300,000 into my husband's account and walked out without a word, they thought I vanished. I didn't. I multiplied. Because silence isn't surrender. Silence is strategy. I used to think perfection was a destination, that if I dressed well enough, smiled soft enough, and stayed quiet long enough, I'd earn a place in a world that wasn't built for me. When I married Eric Bell, CEO of a rising pharmaceutical firm and heir to a legacy fortune, I was applauded as if I'd won a prize. People told me I was lucky. They admired my restraint, my posture, my grace under pressure, like I was an exhibit of modern refinement. They didn't know I practiced being invisible, because invisibility was the only currency they trusted in a woman like me. Eric's family was the kind that spoke in half-truths and compliments shaped like cages. His mother, Meredith, wore pearls that hadn't left the family vault in 3 generations. She smiled with her mouth and measured worth by lineage. At our engagement dinner, she leaned in close and whispered, "You're quite the surprise. I expected, well, someone louder." From that day, I knew my job wasn't to be a wife. It was to be digestible. Our wedding was held in the family's summer estate in Maine, under a white canopy flanked by imported cherry blossoms. Everything was curated, except my opinion. Meredith chose the linens, the flowers, even the photographer. I was handed a script. Simple elegance, Samantha. You don't want to look like you're trying. The portrait from that day still hangs in the foyer. A massive canvas, oil-brushed perfection. Eric's jaw angled toward legacy, my shoulders tilted toward submission. I remember standing there for over an hour, retaking the pose because the light didn't catch your smile just right. But what no one knows is that I wasn't smiling. I was holding my breath. The early days of our marriage were orchestrated like a symphony. Lavish dinners, press photos, curated charity events. I wasn't just Eric's wife. I was a brand extension. My inbox filled with PR calendars, etiquette refreshers, and schedules for facial appointments. I complied. Not because I was weak, but because I knew how to bide time. Eric was never cruel. That would have made things simpler. He was considerate in a way that erased me. I've hired someone to take care of your wardrobe. No need to stress. Let's not overthink the vacation. My assistants booked everything. You don't need a bank account, love. What's mine is yours. Except nothing really was. At first, I convinced myself it was convenience. Then, slowly, it started to scrape. Like when he canceled my gym membership because that personal trainer was too intense, or when he replaced my birth control with a natural supplement regimen approved by his corporate wellness advisor. "Just trust me," he'd say with that trademark smile. The shift came slow, like a painting fading under sunlight. It began with a routine estate planning meeting. Eric was finalizing a new trust for tax optimization, and I was there only to observe. The financial advisor, a middle-aged man with practiced indifference, looked at me and said, "Don't worry, ma'am. As a contingent beneficiary, you're protected." "Contingent?" I asked. "Yes. In the event of Eric's incapacitation, you may be eligible, but only if the primary line fails. Standard structure. Nothing to concern yourself with." My heart didn't race. It simply slowed. Contingent. Eligible. May. That night, I sat across from Eric at dinner and asked, "Do I have any direct ownership of anything?" He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if something happened, would I even legally exist in our financial structure?" He laughed gently, like I'd just misunderstood the plot of a movie. "Samantha, that's not how legacy works. Everything is protected under the family architecture. You're part of that. Through me. Through him." The next morning, Meredith dropped by unannounced with fresh lavender and a soft voice. "Sweetheart, I know financial jargon can be a bit overwhelming, but don't worry. We've made sure you're taken care of. Just focus on being the heart of the home. That's your true value." That's when I knew. I wasn't a partner. I was a curated accessory, polished, placed, and preserved. The final crack came on a Thursday. I was walking past the home office when I overheard Eric on a call. He was discussing a new biotech acquisition and said, "Yeah, Samantha's great PR. Makes me look grounded. Clients like the family image." I stood still. I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I just felt evaporated. That night, I stared at the wedding portrait again. And for the first time, I didn't see a memory. I saw a warning. I hadn't chosen that frame, that pose, that smile. It had been selected for me. My image, frozen in a life that wasn't mine. And I realized, if they could paint me into perfection, I could write myself out of it. The day I discovered the tracking device, I wasn't even looking for it. I was reaching for my coat, same one I wore to weekly brunch with Meredith, and felt something sewn into the inner seam. A thin square tag, warm to the touch. It pulsed faintly when I pressed it, like it had a heartbeat of its own. My stomach nodded. I didn't confront Eric. I logged onto the family network from my tablet and began digging. Within an hour, I found the rest. Shared access to my texts. Call logs archived under health monitoring. Spending caps set with pre-approvals. My phone, my money, my voice, filtered through a firewall built in my name but governed by someone else. There was no screaming, just silence, so sharp it cracked something in me. They wanted me quiet, so I got quieter. But this time, I wasn't disappearing. I was redesigning. Before I married Eric, I ran financial simulations for hedge funds. I designed risk engines, profiled liquidity models, and led an internal blockchain compliance audit for a startup that's now worth 9 figures. I was headhunted by firms who begged me to leave academia early. But when I got engaged, Meredith said, "Smart women intimidate legacy men. You'll thank us later." So I shelved that part of me, for love, for family, for a lie. But now I resurrected her. I opened a cold wallet, then a second, then a burner laptop. I activated an alias I hadn't used in years, SC Bellamy, and logged onto a private DeFi exchange. Within days, I found them, women like me. Anonymous handles, encrypted channels, no avatars. They spoke in code but shared one thing. They'd been erased and were rewriting the rules. They called themselves Fintel. One message changed everything. We don't burn things down. We rewrite blueprints while they sleep. It wasn't a rebellion. It was evolution. I listened more than I spoke. They taught me how to map hidden trusts, identify offshore laundering patterns disguised as philanthropic ventures, and how to restructure contracts without ever appearing on the paperwork. It was elegant, silent, legal. At night, I smiled at dinner while scanning the QR code on the wine bottle, just to test what Eric saw when I moved. He always knew. He always smiled like a man who believed I'd never know better. The deeper I went, the more I saw. I wasn't just locked out of our finances. I was a product of them. Every vacation I posted, tax write-off, every piece of jewelry, leased, every asset in our name, held in blind trusts where I was never even a shadow signer. One night, Eric poured wine and said, "Remember that pitch about a digital accountability ledger for pharma supply chains? I used it in our last meeting. Blew them away." I blinked. That was my idea, sketched on a napkin 6 months ago. He'd laughed, said it was cute. I smiled. I'm glad it helped. That night, I opened my private node and began a mirror map of the family's financial ecosystem. It started as self-defense. It became art, shell companies, investor trails, regulatory backdoors, all leading back to structures Meredith built during her tenure as CFO 20 years ago. It was genius, illegal in parts, fragile in others. I began recording everything, Every offhand remark, every veiled threat dressed as concern, every transaction disguised as charity. I encrypted them, stored them in a vault with a dead man's switch. Not because I planned to use it, but because knowing I could made me breathe again. In 3 months, I grew a separate asset pool from micro investments, rerouted kickbacks from 3 pharmaceutical grants Eric signed in my name, and funneled the returns into a liquid index tied to anonymous real estate purchases in Nevada. $300,000. Untouched. Untraceable. They thought they'd erased me. But I had become negative space, an outline they never saw moving. Meredith's downfall began with a single signature, a new estate protection contract, rushed to meet tax deadlines. She handed it to me one morning over tea. "Just a formality, dear. We're restructuring in your favor this time. See? Beneficiary." I signed. So did she. But the document she filed wasn't the one she reviewed. I'd rewritten Clause 14C. It was subtle. A transfer condition, deferred through joint consent mechanisms, but it effectively handed me veto power on any liquidation event tied to Eric's equity. She didn't notice. That's what happens when you train someone to be decorative. They become invisible, and invisible things get into places no one expects. That night, I stood by our bedroom window, looking out at the garden. Eric was asleep. My tablet buzzed once, a message from the Fintel network. "You're not the wife, you're the architect." And for the first time in years, I felt seen. When I first walked into the Royal Haven Ladies Society, I wore white, soft, unassuming, forgettable. Meredith introduced me as our Samantha, with the same pride one might reserve for a house-trained dog. The women smiled like mirrors, all lips and no eyes. They asked no real questions, which was perfect, because I wasn't there to talk. I was there to listen. The society was more than a vanity club. It was a financial funnel dressed in pearls and flower arrangements. Underneath the gala planning and scholarship teas, it was a conduit for tax-shielded money movement. Meredith sat on every anonymous donor panel, and behind every philanthropy effort was a trail of capital engineered to circle back to Bell Pharma through off-book sponsorships and silent equity placements. She wasn't running a nonprofit. She was laundering legacy. So I played the part. I nodded, smiled, offered to co-host a fundraiser for rural prenatal access. In the background, I began sketching something far more dangerous. Eleanor Rose. She was my avatar, a female angel investor with a shadowy background in biotech disruption and a known taste for narrative-led founders. Her online presence was surgical. No selfies, no fluff, just enough venture capital buzz to earn whispers. I seeded forums with fake interviews, testimonials, and whispers of her attending investor retreats in Bali and São Paulo. Within 2 weeks, Eleanor had a growing cult status in niche founder circles. Then came the Ledger Project, a promising blockchain initiative that claimed to track drug authenticity across rural health systems. It addressed every concern Eric's board had flagged in recent meetings. I presented it through Eleanor. Pitch decks, code demos, mock trial feedback, and when Eric's team discovered it through an independent scout, they jumped. Eric was always looking for his legacy moment. I made sure this one sparkled. He brought it to the board with enthusiasm. I watched him rehearse the pitch at home, pacing with confidence, parroting every concept I'd whispered into his subconscious months ago. "This changes everything," he told me, eyes gleaming. "I might finally get Dad's seat." I nodded. "You should go all in." They did. The initial investment was $1.2 million, funneled through a discretionary vehicle co-managed by Bell Pharma and an anonymous syndicate. The anonymous syndicate was me. But the Ledger Project wasn't real. It was a beautifully structured shell with open source code, faux testimonials, and staged demo data. Enough to pass due diligence, but designed to fail in subtle ways. Not dramatically, just enough to lose trust, raise eyebrows, slow momentum. the market would blame volatility, founder incompetence, or even bad timing. Meanwhile, Eleanor Rose was quietly redirecting interest to cool, less risky, more stable ventures. Ventures that, coincidentally, I'd invested in months earlier under my real name through unlinked trusts. Within a month, Eric's board began to question his judgment. Performance dips, negative cash flow projections, and missed KPIs. He was blindsided. I watched the spiral begin, one graceful decimal at a time. But numbers were never the endgame. Narrative was. The opportunity came at the Bell Foundation's Spring Legacy Gala, an annual display of power dressed as charity. Meredith had planned everything down to the caviar placement. Eric was slated to announce a new partnership with the Ledger Project, still believing it could be salvaged. I arrived early. While the staff rehearsed light cues and the caterers adjusted florals, I swapped the gala presentation file with a custom-cut video. Not dramatic, just one clip, one moment tucked between slides. Dinner began. Speeches followed. Glasses clinked. Then came the reveal. A projection on a 10-foot screen. Eric's voice, grainy but clear. "She's like a breathing statue, beautiful, pliable, and completely replaceable." There was silence, then murmurs. Meredith's face turned marble white. She stood, walked to me, and slapped me. I didn't flinch. Eric stared ahead, frozen. He didn't deny it, didn't apologize, just sat in the wreckage of his own design. But the damage wasn't done yet. What they didn't know was that the gala livestream, usually private, had been quietly opened to a public channel. Hundreds watched in real time. Thousands more shared the clip within the hour. By morning, Tachin's statue wife trended in 6 countries. Influencers posted reaction videos. Former employees shared stories of being dismissed, ignored, sidelined. A wave of women began recounting their own silent wife experiences. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about all of us. I didn't speak. I didn't explain. I sent one email to the company's internal mailing list. Subject, "You valued silence." Here's what it bought. Inside, a single link, a folder, encrypted audio files, financial records, policy drafts, internal messages showing how Bell Pharma built a culture of cosmetic diversity while gatekeeping power, and Eric's notes, mocking board members, calling employees brand puppets, dismissing legal compliance as decorative panic. It was not illegal. It was worse. It was cultural rot. By evening, the board had called an emergency meeting. Stock dropped 7 points. Meredith resigned from the foundation for health reasons. Eric deactivated all his social profiles. And me? I went home, took off my heels, boiled water for tea. Then I opened my laptop and typed a single sentence into the FinTel channel. Phase 1 complete. 3 days after the gala, I left. No press release, no suitcase, no drama. I wired $300,000 into Eric's personal account. Every cent I had built under the radar. It wasn't an apology. It was a receipt. I attached a single message. "Now you own me." Literally. I logged out of every device, wiped every trace. By sunrise, the penthouse closet stood immaculate, shoes aligned, jewelry untouched, perfume sealed. The wedding photo was gone. In its place, I left an envelope taped to the mirror, a copy of the marriage license with one word circled: irrevocable. They say power is loud, but sometimes it's the silence that detonates. By noon, I was a ghost. The Bell estate went into chaos. Meredith called in private security. Eric filed a missing persons report. News outlets speculated everything from kidnapping to suicide. But I wasn't missing. I was already on a plane, sipping black coffee under the name Lena Royce, flying east toward a country that didn't know me, didn't care, and that's precisely why I chose it. Meanwhile, the market turned. The video from the gala kept spreading, not just as gossip, but as a case study. Every podcast, blog, and think tank dissected the fall of the perfect power couple. But the real quake came from the documents I leaked. Analysts combed through internal Bell Pharma files and uncovered decades of questionable charitable structures, shell foundations that funneled money back into private accounts, international partnerships that skirted regulatory zones. The tipping point came when Meredith's name surfaced in connection with a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands, one she'd denied any knowledge of under oath. An anonymous whistleblower, me, provided the smoking gun: voice memos, spreadsheets, signed agreements, even metadata from scanned PDFs. Every byte collected, sorted, and time-stamped over 3 years. By the end of the week, Meredith Bell was under formal investigation for international tax evasion and fraud. Bell Pharma's stock plunged 18%. Investors fled. Eric was removed from the board, pending clarity. He stood on the sidewalk outside their headquarters one morning, caught by a paparazzo, looking like a man who had never seen consequence before. But this wasn't revenge. This was architecture, and I was just getting started. Somewhere in a quiet city whose name I won't share, I set up the Ether Fund. No marble lobby, no golden plaques, just a server, a mission, and an encryption wall stronger than any corporate firewall. The fund wasn't a company. It was a safe house, a system built for women like me, married into power, silenced by structure, erased by paperwork. Each case was reviewed through an algorithm I designed, analyzing risk, control, and access. We helped them hide, invest, protect, and rebuild. Not loudly, not with lawsuits. Quietly, legally, effectively, like erosion beneath a fortress. We operated under aliases. No meetings, no press, no glory. Until one morning an email came through from a small independent journalist in Vancouver. Subject line: "Whoever you are, you're changing lives." Attached was a draft of a story. Anonymous woman, former spouse of a pharma executive, now quietly leading a financial underground for survivors of economic captivity. I didn't reply, but I did one thing. I sent the journalist a quote, uncredited. "Silence isn't weakness, it's foundation." The article published 2 weeks later. It went viral. Women wrote in from Spain, Kenya, Missouri, Seoul. Their stories weren't identical, but the theme was marriages where finances were used as fences, where trust funds came with NDAs, where love was conditional on silence. One woman wrote, "I thought I was the only one who didn't have the password to her own mortgage." Another, "He said, 'Don't worry, it's all in my name because I'm better at numbers. I have a math degree.'" They came not for justice, but for language, a way to name what they'd endured. So I gave them stories. I launched a podcast under an anonymous host name. Every week I interviewed a different voice, a composite of real testimonies, distorted and layered for protection. We called them the Echoes. The third episode featured a woman who sounded suspiciously like me. She said, "I used to think I was a bad wife because I didn't feel safe. But the truth is, I wasn't a wife. I was a compliant asset. And when I left, they didn't lose a person. They lost ownership." The episode broke streaming records. A week later, I got a message from a user tagged Dust to Gold. "Your silence built a cathedral. We're praying inside it now." I didn't reply. I recorded a final bonus episode, my voice disguised, the tone calm. I didn't leave because I was afraid. I left because I was finished building. They thought silence meant surrender, but I was never hiding. I was engineering. I closed the file, turned off the mic, then I walked outside, into a city that didn't know my name and didn't need to. Power doesn't come with warning labels. It just shows up. Quiet at first, like admiration, like thanks, and then louder, like expectation. The women who came to Ether weren't looking for revenge. Not at first. They wanted clarity, safety, leverage. But some wanted fire. And I had given them matches. The first lawsuit came from New Jersey. A woman, let's call her Claire, used one of our asset protection templates to redirect marital funds into an untouchable account. Her husband found out. He sued for fraud, defamation, manipulative financial destabilization. The term didn't even exist in law, but his attorney made it sound criminal. The press spun it fast. Ether tactics spark legal firestorm. They didn't name me, but it was only a matter of time. I watched the headlines roll in from the quiet of a rooftop cafe, sipping tea as if I weren't at the center of an ideological civil war. I knew this moment would come. What I didn't know is how it would feel. Heavy, not like guilt, like gravity. I hadn't told Claire to lie, but I had handed her the tools, the roadmap, the mask. I opened my inbox, hundreds of messages, some from women thanking me, others from lawyers threatening to unmask me. One email stood out. Subject, "Can we talk?" Sender, Eric Bell. I froze. Not fear, not nostalgia, just stillness. I replied with a meeting time. Public cafe, no digital trail. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner, grayer, not just older, emptier, like a statue someone forgot to polish. "I almost didn't come," I said. He nodded. "I almost didn't ask." Silence. Then he said, "You never raised your voice. That's what I remember most. You never had to." I waited. He looked down at his coffee. "I didn't know you had fire. I didn't know you had hollow." He smiled, a small, sad thing. "Everything fell apart after you left. The company, my reputation, my certainty." He paused. And then I read that quote about silence being engineering. I knew it was you. I didn't confirm. I didn't need to. He leaned forward. "I want to help." "Help who?" "Whoever you're helping. Ether, or whatever it's called. I don't want to rebuild what I had. I want to build something new." I studied him. Not for trust, but for truth. He wasn't lying. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't even hoping. He was ready. "That's not my decision," I said. "Ether doesn't have an open door. It has a mirror." He understood. "Then tell me what I need to see." It was the strangest moment of my life, watching the man who once owned me ask for instructions. But power isn't about control, it's about clarity. He left without a promise, and that was enough. Then came the backlash. Meredith Bell, newly disgraced but not yet defeated, emerged from whatever polished exile she'd crawled into and gave an exclusive interview to a financial gossip network. The headline read, "Parasite Queen, the woman who hacked her way into power." She didn't say my name, but she didn't need to. She called me a performative victim, a calculated manipulator, a crypto widow with a messiah complex. I read it twice, then once more, slowly. There was no rage, no heartbreak, just proof. She had underestimated me. Again, I opened the vault. Inside was a document from 3 years ago, a forged signature on a marital asset reallocation form. My name, in cursive, perfectly duplicated. Metadata showed it had been generated from Meredith's office at 3:07 p.m. on a Thursday when I was in Geneva. I sent it to 3 journalists. Then I logged off. The news broke in 48 hours. Forgery, tax tampering, coercive control. Meredith Bell became a case study in weaponized wealth. Investors who had once defended her now distanced themselves. Her speaking engagements were canceled, her honorary board seats revoked. And me? They tried to name me, frame me, interview me, but I was gone. Not literally, just ideologically. I watched from the outside as the narrative shifted, from gold digger to gold architect, from silent wife to silent strategist, from scandal to symbol. But I didn't return. I didn't publish a memoir. I didn't take the podium. I stepped back, because visibility had never been the point. Influence was. I shut down my podcast. I handed Ether's operations to a council of 7 anonymous women, all formerly invisible. I deleted my aliases. I shredded my backup keys. People said I disappeared. They were wrong. I expanded. In one final encrypted post, I wrote, I don't need to be seen to shape the view. Power isn't presence, it's pressure applied in silence. And then I closed the tab. Venice greeted me with fog and forgiveness. There was something about the way the city floated, detached from the earth, yet rooted in memory, that made it feel like the only place left where I could be no one, or maybe, finally, myself. I lived in a third-floor flat above a used bookstore that smelled like wet wood and old paper. My windows opened to canals that sang at dawn. No one recognized me. No one asked questions. And that anonymity felt more intimate than any identity I had ever been given. I taught in a studio down the alley, a converted gallery with cushions on the floor and sunlight slicing through broken glass mosaics. The course was called Finance and Stillness, Understanding Wealth Through Silence. It wasn't about investment strategies. It wasn't even about money. It was about teaching women how to listen to the stories they'd been told about their worth and then rewrite them. I never told them my name. They never asked. Some called me the silent coach. Others, the gold whisperer. But most just called me her, as in, thanks to her. At the end of each session, I handed out blank journals and asked them to write one sentence. What did silence teach you today? The answers were never the same, but always familiar. That I don't need permission to say no. That wealth isn't about possession. It's about sovereignty. That I am not too much. I was just measured by too little. Then came the letter. A plain envelope slipped under the studio door one rainy morning. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten in blue ink. Thanks to you, I didn't marry him. No signature, no backstory, just a sentence sharp enough to cut through decades of programming. I read it twice, then again. I didn't cry. I smiled, because that was the only victory I'd ever wanted. For one woman, just one, to choose herself before she had to escape, and that was when I knew I had done enough. I scaled back the sessions, let the studio go, kept the windows open, the tea warm, the silence intact. That's when the book surfaced, The Gold Digger's Code. No publisher listed, no author named, just a simple black cover embossed with a small gold key. Inside, each chapter began with a parable and ended with a single line from an email, signed, S. No one could prove it was me, but they all suspected. The media speculated wildly. She was married to a billionaire. She ran a financial cult. She was a ghost in the market. She never existed. It became a global sensation, translated into 41 languages, banned in 3 countries, cited in divorce courts, therapy offices, university syllabi. Women underlined passages in red and whispered them to friends. Ownership without recognition is servitude. Security built on silence is a cage with velvet walls. Legacy is not what you leave behind, it's what you dismantle on your way out. A filmmaker reached out with an unusual proposal. A documentary without interviews, no narration, no dramatization, just visuals. Homes, offices, courtrooms, wedding photos, bank ledgers, receipts, burner phones, jewelry boxes, surveillance screenshots. At the end, a single shot. A woman, barefoot, standing at the edge of a beach. Back turned to the camera, wind in her hair, dressed in white. Silent. She takes a step into the water. The screen fades to black, and the words appear. Silence is not surrender, it's strategy. I watched the premiere from a distance. An online stream, anonymized IP, volume low. When it ended, the chat exploded. Women sharing stories, men asking questions, parents rethinking inheritance plans, whole classrooms creating projects on ethical wealth. My story, never confirmed, became a collective myth, and that made it untouchable. One comment stayed with me. She never asked to be followed, she just walked out and left the doors open behind her. I logged off, walked outside. The moon dripped across the canal like a second sky. The city was quiet, old, unfinished, like me. And I realized something I hadn't dared admit until now. I no longer needed silence to survive. I had learned to live inside it, to shape it, to breathe through it, to lead from within it. Power wasn't mine to hold. It was mine to dissolve. And in that dissolving, I left the most lasting mark. So I took one last breath of night air, closed the door behind me, and stepped into the light.